So welcome everybody. So I just want to start off today with a couple of short announcements. The first will be about A2, and this is the second assignment that you folks will be working on. And so for A2, what you'll be doing, close this out, is that you'll be doing a paper review, and you'll summarize the following. You'll, based upon the paper that you'll be reviewing, you'll answer some questions like what are the research questions and hypotheses in the paper that you're reviewing? What is the motivation for the work? How did the authors conduct the experiment or case study? And did you notice any limitations or flaws in how they did their work? And for describing limitations or flaws, one great way to do this is to look at some subsequent works based off the research that you'll be reading. Now, for this activity, there won't be any subsequent work because you'll be reading some pretty recent papers. But in the future, if you're ever reading a paper and you want to find some of its flaws and areas that can be improved upon, you can either take a look at the future work section, which should be in the papers that you'll be reviewing, or you can look to see what other types of what subsequent works have been based upon the research that you are reading about. You'll also look to see what data did they gather and how did they analyze it, and do you believe their approach was reasonable for collecting data, and were there independent and dependent variables the user selected or the author selected. What were the results of this work? What did they find? And do these make sense given the research questions and hypothesis? And discuss any limitations of the study. Now, these could be limitations that you find or limitations that the authors note. And to find the paper that you'll be reading, I'm going to let you folks find a paper for yourself. But what I am asking you to do is find a full paper from the latest version of ICSE. Now, ICSE stands for the International Conference of Software Engineering. It's a conference that's held once a year in late May. In my opinion, it's the top software engineering conference in the world. If it's not the top, it's definitely in the top 2 conferences in the world. It's very good. Any papers you read that are published at ICSE should be of the highest quality. And so what you should do is you should find a full paper, so not a short paper. When I say short, I mean that'd be like a 2 or 4 page paper or 6-page paper. But you should find a full paper from the latest offering of ICSE. Now, to find the latest offering of ICSE, frankly, if you just type in ICSE and then the current year, it'll take you to the current ICSE website, and then it'll take you maybe a little bit of searching to find the latest papers published there. So it may take 5 or 10 minutes of searching to find the list of accepted papers to ICSE. But once you find the list of accepted papers to ICSE, read the titles, maybe read the abstracts, find a paper that's interesting to you. And then once you find the paper that's interesting to you, you can go ahead and start answering these questions for assignment 2 based on that paper. So when you submit this assignment, make sure to upload it to the appropriate My Courses Dropbox. A PDF document's preferred. If you can answer all of these questions in at least 2 full pages, single-spaced, that would be helpful. If you are a little bit less than 2 pages, that's okay. But you should be able to aim for 2 pages, single-spaced. If there's any other areas that you want to mention that aren't described in this assignment, maybe there's other analysis that you want to do, feel free to do that. But you should take a look at these sections here and think of these as the minimum as you should be doing for this work. This is on top of the normal, go down to the bottom here, normal research analysis assignment that you'll be doing. And like I mentioned at the start of the semester, much of this course is based upon reading and taking on your shoulders to read. So you should be spending quite a bit of time reading and understanding current bodies of work out there, okay? So moving ahead, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about research statements and research proposals. And then I'm going to lead you folks into a short activity that you'll be doing offline. Okay, so just make sure, as always, make sure I'm recording still. Okay. So we touched on problem statements a little bit in previous weeks, but I want to spend most of this week really focusing upon problem statements. So good research begins with a good problem statement. And like I mentioned last week, problem statements aren't long in length, but they will take you a long time to actually create. And a good problem statement is a clear description of the issue, including the vision, issue statement, and method used to solve the problem. So I will underline the word clear here. You want to eliminate ambiguity in your research statement. You want to give the reader a clear understanding of what the problem you're trying to solve. So like I mentioned here, you should include the vision of what you're trying to solve and the method used to solve the problem. Okay. So good research begins with a good problem statements, and these problem statements provide background on a specific area. And so while you're not providing a lot of depth in your research statement, you will provide a very high-level, broad overview of a background in a specific area. And for you, it will provide you goals and direction for your work. I think one of the hardest things to do when starting research is to have a good goal and a direction for your work. Now, when you start your work, it's quite all right to deviate from your initial plan a bit. Frankly, that's what usually happens in research. The unplanned usually happens, so a lot of ways you should plan for the unplanned. But at the very least, you should have a pretty good direction for your work. You should have a goal you're working towards. And while your advisor can help with your goal, providing your own goal is something that you should do to help guide your work. And finally, the problem statement you'll be writing will demonstrate the need for the issues that you're solving. If you're solving an issue that nobody cares about, then it's useless. It's kind of like me creating an app that nobody will ever use. If I do that, it's a really useless app. I could create the best messaging app ever. I could create the best social media network ever, but if there's not a need for it and nobody will use it, I'm just wasting my time. So a good problem statement will also help demonstrate the need for the work that you are doing. Now, problem statements usually include the 5 W's. And these W's are who, what, where, when, and why. So a good rule of thumb is if you include these 5 W's in your problem statement, it's more than likely a decent problem statement, to say the least. Okay, so sorry about that. Problem statements usually contain the 5 W's and some examples of these 5 W's for who, what, where, when, and why. For who would be who does the problem affect? Are there specific groups, organization, customers, different systems? Who is being affected by the problem that you're describing? And the what, you could think of what are the boundaries of the problem, organizational flows, maybe specifically what the issue is, and so forth. When does the issue occur? And when does it need to be fixed? So does it occur all the time? Does it only occur in specific situations? Maybe environmental situations or time situations. So you'd be defining when the problem is occurring. So for the where, it's where is the issue occurring? Does it take place only on certain devices? Does it take place in only certain languages? Maybe does it take place in certain countries, I guess, but where is it occurring? And then the why, that's something you'll lead a little bit into in your problem statement. You don't need to get into too in-depth in your problem statement, especially if it's a more complicated problem. But you'd say, why is it important to fix the issue? Why should people care about this? What is the impact of this issue? What stakeholders does it affect? So here you're really driving home why it's important that you'll actually be addressing the issue that you're going to be mentioning. So as an example, you could consider a software development and hosted data services company that supplies products and services to wireless carriers. In the past, they've had issues deploying new software releases into the production environment. Deployment in this case is the work necessary for taking a production-ready binary, installing it, testing it, releasing it into the production environment. The company failed to deploy these releases on schedule 50% of the time. So just kind of coming out from this a bit. So this statement includes the who, what, where, when, and why. Okay. So who is the software development hosting company. So for the what, they've had issues deploying the new software into their production environment. And that also leads into the where statement. Why is it important? It's failed to deploy the releases on schedule 50% of the time. And I think when it discusses it, let's see. Yeah, it would be right in here. In this case, is necessary for testing releases in production environment. So that would include the when. So this would be an example of a good problem statement. Okay. So this is an example of the Simpsons problem statement. If you know the Simpsons at all, they're the cartoon show that's been on for about 20 or 30 years or so, forever. And so a problem statement for this could be, The Simpsons seems to be the story of a fractured, chaotic, sometimes violent family. However, this interpretation fails to explain why the Simpsons family does so many things together. Vacations, family, dinners, and church. If we continue to see Simpsons as a merely dysfunctional family, we'll never understand the show's real meaning and appeal. In fact, The Simpsons represents a very traditional approach to family values. So in actuality, this is arguing that The Simpsons aren't as, I guess, detrimental or weird as a lot of people feel. And so this would be another example of a good problem statement to be having. So again, a good problem statement can represent the reasons for motivation behind your proposal. It can specify the conditions you want to change, so the reason why you're doing it, what are you looking to solve, and it should be supported by evidence. So if you create a problem statement that has no evidence to back it up, it's not really a problem statement at that point. It's really more of an assertion or a hypothesis. With that said, in your problem statement, you don't need to cite tons of resources. But if your problem statement isn't backed up by any kind of prior evidence, you should really think about resolving it a bit. Because, like I said, it might be more of a hypothesis or assertion at that point. Okay. So other purposes for your problem statement is it will specify your research questions, hypothesis, and it suggests a solution to the problem. So it will help specify what your research question or hypothesis is going to be. It will also demonstrate they have some familiarity with the prior research being done in this area, and to show that you are capable of extending it, and to show that this area does need to be extended or built upon. And even if your problem is obvious, so sometimes problem statements can mention things that are somewhat obvious. Your audience will not want to know how clearly you can state it. So your audience is going to want to know that you can clearly define this problem. So some key points you want to address in your problem statement is you want to demonstrate a precise understanding of the issue and the motivation behind the problem you're trying to solve. You want to clearly convey the focus of your project early in the narrative. So early in the problem statement, you want to define what the focus of your project is. And usually in a research paper, you'll see a problem statement early on. And that helps tell the reader what the focus of your work will want to be. And in the problem statement, you can indicate the relationship of your problem to a larger set of problems. So how does the problem you're solving, how does that relate to maybe bigger issues in research? Now, you don't need to address those bigger issues in your prompt statement, and frankly, you shouldn't address those bigger issues. But tying your problem statement into bigger problems, larger problems, is generally a good thing. It can help show the impact of the work that you're doing. And it also helps to demonstrate that your research question or hypothesis is supported by previous evidence and observations. And it can demonstrate their problem is feasible to solve and the experimental design is appropriate for validations of questions in your hypothesis. Okay. So there are a lot of good resources out there towards writing a good problem statement. So I have linked to one. This is one linked on, I think it's pronounced capatra.com, and it discusses how to write a good problem statement. And like I said, there are many, many websites out there that discuss how to write a good problem statement. But I think this website is a very good resource for you to use. So this site discusses some of the things like the 5 W's that we discussed, some examples of good research statements. There are a lot of really good websites out there that have good demonstrations of good and bad problem statements. So I'd actually encourage you to Google good problem statements, bad problem statements, because I think it can be pretty helpful to read bad problem statements to understand how not to write the problem statements. What's up? Okay. So at this point, I just want to take a little bit of time and go into thesis and dissertations. The difference between thesis and capstone projects. And so there are 2 projects that you will be working on to conclude your master's degree in software engineering. They will either be a capstone or a thesis project. And as I mentioned earlier in the semester, for some folks, depending on who your sponsor is, they may dictate that you must do a thesis project, while other students have a choice of whether or not to do a thesis or capstone project. So I would, if you're being sponsored by a government or organization, I would definitely check with them to see if you have the option of doing a capstone, because you may be required to do a thesis. So for a capstone, capstones are generally a little bit less intensive. I would say most students do capstone projects. For both the capstone and thesis projects, you'll have to work with a SE faculty advisor. Now, for capstone projects, these are much more. Your path is much more determined by your by your capstone advisor. They have a lot more decision-making power in your capstone project. But every capstone project, every capstone and really thesis project will have some of the same items. They will have a problem statement. They'll have research questions. They'll have related work inside of their literature review. And each capstone project should include a plan of work. And this plan of work should be defined between you and your advisor, but an example plan of work could describe maybe 6 or 7 different parts, and here I have 6 different parts listed. And so your first part may describe some of the main challenges that you'll be addressing. Maybe the methodology that you'll use, technology choices. If relevant, you don't need to list technology choices. And frankly, technology choices are usually one of the last things you decide upon. Data to be collected. So where are you going to collect it? What data are you going to collect? How the data will be analyzed, in a schedule. So every advisor is different, but for me, the schedule is a very important item. That's something I spend a lot of time with the students working on as far as planning out their capstone projects. So thesis projects are generally much more involved than capstone projects. And thesis projects, they do have a couple more departmental requirements, and your advisor can help you with the specifics of those requirements. But probably the biggest requirement that differentiates a capstone and thesis project is that thesis projects require an end-of-term paper. And so this paper could be anywhere between 30 pages or, frankly, 130 pages. So there's no set length for a thesis project. But generally they're pretty involved. And like a capstone thesis, projects generally include a problem statement, research questions, hypothesis, where your contribution will be, and related works. And like a capstone, um, um, they'll include some features like methodology, technology choices, data to be collected, data will be collected, analyzed, and a schedule. So capstone and thesis projects follow a lot of the same routes, and these routes are usually defined between you and your advisor. But there's a lot more components into your thesis or capstone project than just the paper itself. It's just like writing software. Well, the code is an important deliverable. There are a lot of other pieces like documentation, testing, etc., that you should be creating and delivering upon in addition to just the actual code. Okay. Um, so that's really it as far as capstone and thesis. We'll be talking about that much more throughout the semester, and I definitely welcome you asking questions related to these topics throughout the semester, because this is, frankly, can be confusing to a lot of folks, and that's okay. That's what I'm here to help you folks out with. So, what you'll be doing today is, or what you'll be doing this week, I'm sorry, for short, I guess you would call it, quote, in-class activity, is that you'll be creating a problem statement for a potential research topic. And this problem statement for the potential research topic could be in any area of computing, but try to make it be somewhat realistic. And inside the My Courses discussion forum, you should post this problem statement. And I'm going to change this right now. Just hold on, sorry. Okay. So sorry about that. So what you'll be doing for the activity is that you'll be creating a problem statement for a potential research topic, and try to, like I said a minute ago, try to keep this realistic as far as a good research topic. You'll then, inside of My Courses, inside the week 3 discussion, you'll post this problem statement, and everybody else in the class should give you some feedback on this problem statement that you're posting. And this feedback should be more in the sense of critical feedback, along the lines of maybe your problem statement is a bit too ambiguous, maybe you're not defining the problem well enough, maybe you're not defining how it will impact the external world well enough. And so I think an equally valuable portion of this activity is to not only not only create your problem statement, but also give feedback on other people's problem statements. So once you receive feedback on this problem statement, go ahead and refine the statement based upon the feedback, repost it, and then give and receive feedback from others. The second activity you should do this week is to read a recent FSE paper. So when I say recent, I mean one that was published in the last 2 or 3 years. And identifying the problem statement, and based upon the problem statement, mention did they include the 5 W's. And so it will take a little bit of work on your part to find the most recent FSE papers. I think finding these papers is a good exercise in itself, so it'll give you some familiarity with FSE. And once you find a full paper that you're interested in, read the problem statement and decide if they use the five W's. So thank you, everybody. I think that's it for me for the day. And we'll talk this week if you have any questions on anything. So thank you.